Hi, everyone. My name is Wakanyi Hoffman. I am an African Indigenous thinker and an Indigenous scholar. I could say a wisdom keeper from Africa, storyteller, folklorist, and now an academic researcher. My work is mainly centered on finding ways to incorporate the African philosophy of Ubuntu or the ethics of Ubuntu into AI systems to develop or to design AI systems that have the heart of the human and the innovation of technology. So, very much looking at technology as a partner for how we can best become more human and find more ways to interact on a human level and find ways in which technology can help us bridge gaps, bridge cultural divides that have really plagued our world. So that is my background. And my journey as an Ubuntu keeper of Indigenous wisdom began very early on when I was a little child. So I grew up in Kenya and I grew up at the edge of the Nairobi city, when Nairobi city was burgeoning. And this was also at a time when the city was not as big as it is today. This is quite a while back. And on the edge of the Nairobi city was also the beginning of this very ancient forest, the Ngong Forest, which is one of the oldest indigenous forests in Kenya, and also the only indigenous forest that is in a capital city in the world. So it is roughly around the size of Central Park in New York, and it is rich. It's an ecosystem rich with a river that I played in as a child, and more than 300 species of birds, exotic birds from Kenya. And so this, and wildlife as well. You've got anything ranging from cheetahs, lions, leopards, maybe not as much today because the forest has very much been encroached by human development. However, when I was growing up, those were some of the animals that we had to be careful about. Now, what was special about this forest, and it's still special today, is that inside the forest is a little primary school called the Ngong Forest. And this was the school of my education. This was my foundation, my formal education foundation. So I had this unique experience of growing up and being educated inside the forest, in a school inside the forest, and also by the forest. So my education came from an indigenous forest and of the formality of the English education system, which was very much what our Kenyan education system was premised on. And also at the same time, during the school holidays, I would be, as many other children were, shipped off to the countryside to our grandparents. So my grandparents lived on the edge of Mount Kenya, in along the Mount Kenya region. And so there, then I had a very raw and unstructured, even natural introduction to indigenous ways of being and living, which very much are tied to human relationship with the land. I am from the Kikuyu community, Kikuyu tribe, if you may. Although my grandfather was Maasai, so I also have a little bit of that. But really, it was the Kikuyu women, my grandmother and my grandmothers, many of them, that gave me this introduction to indigenous ways of understanding our place in the world. And I would say this could even be considered a spiritual expression, depending upon how you define the word spiritual. So this intricate experience of being connected and rooted to the land, where the trees and the rivers and the mountain itself were very much part of all my relations, right? It wasn't just playing with children; it was also playing with the animals, with the rabbits in on the ground, or being able to be careful around things like snakes that could be poisonous, and just this kind of living meant that my experience as a child, while one could think of it as a lonely, isolated experience, I didn't think about it in that sense because it wasn't just about human to human interaction. It was also my interaction with the land and what is alive on the land. So my experience with Ubuntu is that Ubuntu is not, it goes beyond the experience of connecting with other human beings. It is also about connecting with everything else that is alive within your ecosystem. So even now, as I live in the Netherlands, and I live in a country that is, not known for its natural landscape, although I've been fortunate enough to live in more or less a village in the northern part of the Netherlands. I still feel that my experience goes beyond the city life. It encompasses the trees in my neighborhood. It encompasses other people's pet dogs that are being walked near my house. It encompasses everything that is alive, really. Whenever the trees outside my garden, they flower or the leaves change color, that becomes a part of my evolving, my growth. So I'm not disconnected with whatever is also alive around me. So it is less about me being in any particular landscape in order to experience or be in my embodied way of being human, which is Ubuntu, but it is more the indigenous thinking that comes along wherever I am, whether I'm in a city, in a bustling city, and I'm walking on the concrete, or I'm in the bush in Kenya. All of it is a reminder of who I am as a human being and the intricate myriad ways in which we can experience our humanity with human invention and also with a more than human experience. So that to me is Ubuntu in practice. And all of this was, I could say, was passed down to me in stories by my grandmothers. They shared a lot of stories, and I could also see how they interact with each other. So that natural process of being human together, not in isolation, gave me this sense of connection to myself, first and foremost, and then to the greater experience of being human with others. And I take that with me everywhere. And so folk tales and storytelling, which I said earlier that I am a folklorist, storytelling is really a way in which I feel fully alive, fully able to express who I am. When I can trade and share and co-create a story with another person, or I can experience something and be able to weave it into the story of who I am or who I am becoming. That to me is a tool, and that is really essential to unlocking your Ubuntu, being able to share your narrative, being able to connect with each other's stories, with each other's experiences. That to me is Ubuntu in practice. So a key message that I could share with us today from Ubuntu Wisdom that can help people and nature thrive in today's uncertain and troubled world is, again, going back to storytelling. No matter what happens, humanity is alive. We are alive because we are storytellers. Storytelling is really the tool that helps us make sense of the world, but not just telling stories in terms of trying to create new worlds. That is imaginary, right? Not imaginary tales, but actually stories of our experience sharing life together. And one of the things that I would say a key message from Ubuntu is really how the way in which we repair our relationships, beginning with ourselves and with each other, with what is around us, and with all that is alive. Really, Ubuntu is about the practice of repairing the fabric of humanity, those connections. So that is the key message that I would give, is that your purpose from an Ubuntu perspective is to continually repair relationships. So we talk a lot about, from an African indigenous perspective, we talk a lot about I am sitting on the shoulders of giants, of ancestors. So my ancestors have walked a particular path up to a certain point. It's a bit like a relay race, and they gave me the baton. Now's your turn to move forward. I can move in any way, in any direction that I please. And the point of it is to move in any way or direction that I please with the tools that will help me maintain good social ties with other people so we can continue to survive and thrive and flourish together. So really, Ubuntu is about repairing those relationships. And if there are relationships in the past with my ancestors that were not fully developed or fully repaired, then before I can move forward, I must first and foremost complete that work of repairing so that I don't take with me that baggage. I don't take with me that trauma. I don't take with me that extra load that I don't really need, right? You need to be able to walk as lightly as you can in order to continue creating more connections, more social ties with others along the way. That is how we create this. We grow in our consciousness about who we are as human beings from an Ubuntu perspective. Now, some of the main pitfalls and potentialities that I see in AI that could inhibit cultivating and communicating our wisdom traditions is the issue of dignity. Dignifying all of life is very essential. It's a bedrock. It's the essence. It's the foundation of Ubuntu. In fact, when you look at Ubuntu principles, which I will discuss during my talk with all of you in the summer, if you look at the Ubuntu principles, the tenets of Ubuntu, as they are called, there are 5 principles. And the very last principle of Ubuntu is dignifying all of life. This is very much rooted in the indigenous principle of interconnectedness, where you reflect on your place in the world with all your relations, other human beings, animals, oceans, and all everything that is alive. So when you think about it from that perspective, what we have then with AI is a potential either to amplify only a few voices or to be able to build connectivity amongst different cultures. In my opinion, AI is a double-edged sword. It's a tool on the one hand, and it is a weapon on the other hand. So if it is a tool, how are we using it to shape a better, more connected world? If it is a weapon, how are we using it to extinguish or diminish certain people's ability to have sovereignty over their own evolution? And so if you think about it like that, AI, from a design perspective, should be able to be designed with the community in mind. And in fact, I very much hold the tension around the need for large language models, or could we design small language models that emerge in different parts of the world that have the potential to communicate, to trade, to share knowledge, to share best practices? Because in that way, when we have smaller language models, then we have the potential to be more inclusive. Because inclusivity on a large scale, we know, is really not that possible. And we also know that a large language model, any large technology is never neutral, and it's not useful everywhere. It might be useful in one part where it originated from, but it might not necessarily be possible to use it in another part of the world. So being able to understand the specific cultural needs, specific linguistic expressions and cultures that help people find their aliveness, their Ubuntu, that to me is an AI that serves to improve the conditions of life for all of us on this planet. And how do we turn to the new fire? Well, there's one particular way that I urge us all to really think about: who are we becoming? Who are we becoming when we interact with artificial intelligence of any kind, whether it is just a simple generative AI, ChatGPT, or it could be an AI system that is a chatbot, right? That you're using for any particular need. And now we have emerging AI agents that are going to be, dominating our lives and doing all manner of tasks for us, including perhaps even shopping for us. What I want us to think about is, what are we using this? What quality of life do we need to improve in order to require us to interact with these bots and other AI services? And also, in particular, when we're thinking about the other, What kind of stories, what kind of internalized biases do we have that we need to be able to understand within ourselves before we can go and design or interact with these AI agents, for example, right? So the words that we use, for example, the stories that we tell, how we tell our stories within these AI systems really says a lot about where we're coming from. And so I encourage everyone to really think about, for example, what kind of prompts are you putting into AI systems? You know, when you prompt ChatGPT with anything, it uses that prompt, the generated response is part of its training data. So we're all AI trainers. We're all agents of AI, training it with new data all the time, depending upon how we use it, depending upon what we're putting in. You know, someone recently said something at a conference that I thought was very apt, really captures the idea of what AI is, that AI is this non-specific amplifier. So whatever we put in into the system is what the system will give us out. It's very cliche, but it really is true. It's junk in, junk out. So can we think perhaps even more philosophically about what is it that we want to feed these systems with? And that requires an introspection, a real reckoning with your own experience, your own historical narratives that you hold, your own understanding of the world. Not to mention that, you know, every time we use AI, we're also extracting from the planet, from the environment. So we need to be mindful and careful around how we use this artificial intelligence and how often even we use it. Now, how do I go about integrating African indigenous wisdom with modern technologies? My work, I am also an academic, like I said, and I work at Utrecht University here in the Netherlands. I'm at the Inclusive AI Lab, and my work is researching sustainable African AI systems. And there I'm really asking AI designers on the continent in Africa, what ethics, what moral considerations are they making? What is the ethical framework that they're using to design their AI platforms? Because now we can design all kinds of AI platforms, and it is really up to the designers to decide what are the ethics that they're going to use. Of course, there's a general ethics of AI, but in terms of like the culture, what are they considerate of? And this is where then I bring in the aspect of the framework of the Ubuntu ethics and principles, which very much apply to an African way of thinking about community, about your place in the world as being part of a community. You know, Ubuntu is captured in this phrase, I am, because of who we all are. This is a very communal or pluralistic way of thinking about yourself. And what I'm trying to investigate is whether or not these AI systems that are emerging on the continent are actually reflective of this logic of being, of this way of being, and amplifying that which is already there, which really works very well if it works, right? Being community and growing in a healthy community. How do we encourage our children to become wise? This is a very, very deeply personal question for me as a mom. I have 4 children, and everything that I do is inspired by who am I becoming? The question of who am I becoming? And am I a role model that my children can look up to? One way or another, our children look up to ourselves until they don't. But they do have deep biases or deep programming based on who we are as their elders, as their parents. And so how do we encourage our children to become wise? By teaching them to ask the right questions. And by right, I don't mean that there's a right question or a wrong question, but there is a way to frame your question that is centered around what is truthful, what inspires you to be a member of society, what creates conditions for flourishing. Imagine if every one of us adults in our occupations, imagine if the intention, the sole purpose of any work that you do was to improve the conditions of life for all human and other more than human species on the planet, how differently would you go to work? How differently would you do your work? So imagine if children grow up with this as their aspiration, and then it becomes the purpose, that the purpose of being human, of Ubuntu, is to continue improving on the conditions of life, of flourishing life on this planet for all. So repairing the fabric of society within the human community and also improving the conditions of life for all that is alive. I think this would create a society of incredibly wise people. And does AI have a role in this? Absolutely. We can use AI systems to help us to have dialogue around issues that affect all of us. Right? If you had small language models mushrooming in different communities around the world and they all could somehow communicate with each other, imagine what one community somewhere, an indigenous community in some remote part of Africa, has to teach a community in New York City about life, about being human, about the climate, about sustainability, about anything. Being able to have that interaction, I think this is possible through AI, but we have to be intentional that this is the purpose of being human, that this is the purpose of our Ubuntu. I'm really looking forward to being with all of you in the summer, and I thank you all for giving me this opportunity to be able to talk about a topic that is very close to my heart, is Ubuntu. Thank you very much.